Dexter couldn't believe what was happening. His wife, Samantha, had made a joke that seemed harmless at first. She'd said she was going to sell him. At first, he laughed it off, assuming it was just a sarcastic remark. However, as Prime Sales Day came and went, everything changed. She actually went through with it and posted an ad online selling him, as though he were an object to be bought. The description she wrote was cruel and humiliating. "This is my husband, a good-for-nothing freeloader without any income. If you're interested in a spineless bum, feel free to place an order. Services are at the buyer's discretion. $200 a day or $50,000 to buy out his entire future. Whoever buys him will have him exclusively, and I'll divorce him on the spot. I wish you all the happiness in the world." Samantha posted this online not to find a buyer, but to mock Dexter, to humiliate him in front of everyone. She never dreamed that someone would actually take her seriously. But to his surprise, a rich woman did. She bought his future, essentially purchasing his life. Dexter felt as though his dignity had been stripped away in an instant, and all he could do was stare at the phone in disbelief. Samantha, with a smirk on her face, handed him the phone. "Dexter, I'm selling you," she said as though it were some casual thing. Dexter's heart sank. This was no joke. As he read the post, his face darkened. It wasn't just an insult, it was a betrayal. When they had married, Dexter had his own business, and things had been good. He had worked hard to provide a comfortable life for her. He had even built her parents a house worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and helped her brother buy a home by giving him $200,000. But everything had changed when Dexter's tech platform company collapsed. Since then, he had been trying to get back on his feet, working from home to develop a video game. Yet in Samantha's eyes, he was a failure, a lazy man who played games all day and didn't earn a single penny. "Isn't this going a bit too far, Samantha? Mocking me like this?" Dexter asked, trying to keep his voice cold, though his hurt was evident. "When things were good, I never hesitated to give everything I had for you and your family. But now that things are tough, you throw this in my face? This is too much." But Samantha wasn't having it. She scoffed at him, dismissing his feelings as though they were unimportant. "You've been sitting at home for 2 years, doing nothing but gaming. Am I wrong to call you a waste of space?" Her words cut deep, and Dexter felt a sting of shame, even though he knew he was working hard on his game. "I'm trying to make a game, Samantha. When it takes off, things will turn around," Dexter said, trying to explain himself. She wasn't having it. "Get a grip, Dexter. You'll never turn things around. Look at you. What are you doing with your life? You look like a bum. The only difference between you and a street beggar is your clothes, and you're still talking about turning things around." Dexter's frustration began to boil over. "You don't understand. I'm working hard," he insisted, but Samantha was unmoved. She had heard his excuses 100 times and wasn't interested anymore. "I'm done with your excuses," she snapped before grabbing her bag and heading for the door. Dexter stood there for a moment, feeling helpless and abandoned. "It's past 8 p.m. Where are you going?" he called after her, hoping she would reconsider. "To work," she replied icily. "How else do you think we'll pay the rent?" Without thinking, Dexter shot back, "I'll pay the rent." But Samantha just laughed, slamming the door behind her as she left. Feeling lost and angry, Dexter tried to shake off his feelings. After a few cigarettes, he strapped on his helmet and opened the delivery app on his phone, hoping to make some extra cash. His next delivery was for crawfish, and the customer even left a $50 tip with a request for him to peel the crawfish. Dexter took the order and drove to the Galactic Lounge karaoke bar to deliver the food. It was about a half-hour drive, and when he arrived, he felt a strange tension in the air. As he walked toward room 8808, he saw Samantha inside, laughing and singing with a group of people. His heart sank when he saw that she was sitting next to her ex, Tyson Caldwell. She had told him she was working late, but here she was acting as though everything was fine. Dexter felt his blood pressure rise as he stood outside the room. He wasn't sure how to react, but the sight of her with Tyson hurt him deeply. The anger bubbled up inside him. As he stood there, a heavy-set girl opened the door to let him in. "Come on in," she said, and Dexter stepped inside, doing his best to keep his emotions in check. Samantha didn't even notice him at first. She was too caught up in the karaoke. "Just sit over there and peel the crawfish for me," she told him, pointing to a corner. Dexter felt like he was suffocating. He turned his back to them and began peeling the crawfish, though his mind was far from the task at hand. A few minutes later, the group decided to play a game of Spin the Truth. Samantha lost and had to answer a personal question. One of the girls, Rebecca, asked her how often she and Dexter had sex. Samantha's response was blunt. "Ugh, don't make me sick. Forget weekly. We haven't done a thing in over a year," she scoffed. The others were shocked and asked her if she was telling the truth. "I swear. If I'm lying, let me get hit by a car," she said, raising her hand like she was making an oath. One of the others asked, "Does your husband even function?" Samantha's response was brutal. "He doesn't. I don't care. Living with him is torture. He's a deadbeat who just plays video games all day, living off me." Each word felt like a knife to Dexter's heart. He had worked so hard for their life together, and here she was, tearing him down in front of a group of strangers. Tyson, sensing an opportunity to comfort her, pulled Samantha into a hug. "You deserve better, Samantha," he said softly, his voice full of sympathy. "If it weren't for your mom, I would have married you long ago." Samantha sniffled, tears streaming down her face. "Dexter has let me down," she sobbed. "I'm so miserable." Dexter couldn't stand it any longer. His chest tightened with anger and sadness. He had loved this woman, given her everything, and this was how she repaid him. Tyson whispered, "Don't cry, Samantha. It hurts me to see you like this. I wish things had turned out differently." But then, the group began to encourage them to kiss. "Come on, a few tears aren't enough. How about a kiss to really make it better?" one of the others teased. Dexter could barely hold himself back. He wanted to confront them, to scream, but he stayed silent as Samantha shyly bit her lip and stared into Tyson's eyes. They seemed about to kiss, and Dexter's anger boiled over. He couldn't just watch this happen. "What's wrong with you? Why would you just start kissing him?" Dexter shouted, his voice full of fury. Samantha snapped back, her tone dripping with disdain. "What's wrong with you? It's just a kiss. Are you really going to get upset over that?" The others laughed as the tension between them escalated. Dexter stood there, shaking with rage, his emotions a storm inside him. Samantha, not seeming to care, continued her harsh words. "You live like a spineless loser, a maggot in a sewer. You're disgusting and worthless," she spat. Dexter's chest felt as if it might explode. The woman he had loved, the woman he had given everything to, had just torn him apart. Dexter had been humiliated for years by his wife, Samantha, who had once been the campus queen in college. She was stunning, and he had put her on a pedestal, doing everything he could to support her and her family. But after all these years, she and her friends treated him like a joke, a failure, someone beneath them. It had all come to a head one fateful night at a karaoke bar. Samantha, surrounded by her college friends, mocked Dexter in front of everyone. They belittled him, questioning how much he made as a lowly delivery guy. They scoffed at his situation, their words cutting into him like a knife. Samantha, with that smug look on her face, seemed to take delight in the way they made him feel small, as if he was meant to accept it, to stay in his place. The humiliation burned inside Dexter. The rage he felt in that moment was indescribable. He left the karaoke bar in a daze, leaving behind the crawfish Samantha had ordered, but not before casting one final glance at her. She didn't even seem to notice he was leaving, too busy laughing with her ex-boyfriend Tyson. The mere thought of Tyson made Dexter's stomach churn. That's when it all became clear to him. He had been nothing to Samantha. In her eyes, he was a dead weight, someone beneath her, someone to be used and discarded. And worse, she had acted as though he had no power to fight back, that he would just endure her mistreatment indefinitely. As Dexter walked home, her words echoed in his mind relentlessly. He was disgusted, worthless, a failure in her eyes, and he had put up with it for far too long. He could have screamed, shouted, or fought back in that karaoke room, but he knew if he did, Samantha and her friends would have only reveled in his outburst. He wouldn't give her that satisfaction. She thought he was weak, but he was determined to show her just how wrong she was. That night, as he sat on his couch, staring blankly at the wall, Dexter made a decision. He wasn't going to take this anymore. He had been in a toxic relationship for too long, carrying the weight of her disregard for him, and now it was time to reclaim his life. He spent the entire night planning his next move. He reviewed every financial document, every contract he had related to the investments he had made in Samantha's family. He had poured money into her parents' house, money that was in his name. He had lent her brother a significant sum of money, and it had never been repaid. Dexter meticulously documented every detail. When the time came, he would use it all. The next morning, Samantha woke up as if nothing had happened. Dexter knew she would try to ignore the situation, acting like everything was fine. She made her coffee and carried on with her routine, but he interrupted her. "Samantha, we need to talk," he said firmly. She looked at him with a bored expression, as though she had already anticipated this moment. "What is it now, Dexter? Are you going to whine about that post again?" she said, barely looking up from her phone. Dexter took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure. He was done whining. He had reached his breaking point. "I'm not going to whine. I'm just going to tell you that I'm done. Done being treated like garbage by someone I put on a pedestal for years. You want to sell me, fine, but let's start by settling your debts first." Samantha froze. She looked at him with a mix of confusion and suspicion. "What are you talking about?" she asked, clearly caught off guard. Dexter's words were cold and deliberate as he continued. "I'm talking about your parents' house, the money I gave your brother, everything. It's all documented, and I'm demanding it back. Don't worry. I won't humiliate you publicly like you did to me. I'll handle it the proper way. Legally." Samantha's face went pale for a moment, and for the briefest second, Dexter thought he saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. But as always, she quickly regained her composure. "You're pathetic. Are you really going to fight over money now, Dexter, after everything I've done for you?" she said, scoffing at him. Dexter could hardly believe her audacity. "Everything you've done for me," he laughed bitterly. "Samantha, you've never done anything for me that wasn't about what you could gain in return." He paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But don't worry, you won't have to deal with me much longer. Our marriage is over." Samantha stared at him in disbelief, before letting out a derisive laugh. "You think you can make it on your own? Look at you. You have nothing, Dexter. Nothing. I'm the only thing standing between you and living on the streets," she sneered. Dexter's anger boiled, but he remained calm. "It's funny you say that," he replied, "because that's exactly how I felt about you for years. But now I realize I was wrong. You were never my support, Samantha. You were the weight I carried for far too long." With that, he grabbed his things and walked out, leaving her standing in the kitchen, shocked and speechless. Dexter didn't waste any time. His first step was to find a lawyer, someone who could help him navigate the mess of debts he was owed. He explained everything to the lawyer: how he had financially supported Samantha and her family, the house he built for her parents, the loan to her brother, and how it was all legally documented. The lawyer assured him he had a strong case and began the work immediately. Meanwhile, Dexter poured himself into his work, determined to prove himself. He had spent years in the shadows, supporting Samantha, but now he was going to show her and the world that he was capable of more. Months went by, and as his lawyer worked on the case, Dexter focused relentlessly on his project. He had been working on a video game for months, investing every ounce of effort into it. The game was his escape, his way of proving that he wasn't a failure, despite what Samantha had always believed. Then the moment came, the game launched. Not only was it well received, but it became an immediate hit. Positive reviews flooded in and sales skyrocketed. Within weeks, Dexter was making more money than he had ever imagined. The first million he earned wasn't about the money. It was about proving to himself that he wasn't the failure Samantha had always claimed him to be. He was more than that. 3 months later, Dexter received a message from Samantha, a simple text that read, "We need to talk. I'm sorry for everything. Can we start over?" He laughed aloud when he saw it. She was desperate. Through mutual acquaintances, Dexter learned that her brother had been forced to sell his house and that her parents were struggling financially. Tyson, her ex, had abandoned her as soon as he realized she was no longer financially stable. Dexter, however, had moved on. He had rebuilt his life, and the past was something he never intended to revisit. He ignored her message. Instead, he focused on the future. His life had transformed into something he could hardly have imagined just a few years ago. His gaming company had grown exponentially, and the latest release had been a global success. Media outlets were seeking him out for interviews, and his success was undeniable. He lived in a modern home overlooking the ocean, surrounded by people who valued and respected him. He also began investing in social projects, helping young developers break into the tech industry, and many of them went on to achieve their own dreams. Dexter felt fulfilled in ways he never had before. As for Samantha, Dexter had heard that she was now living with a friend, relying on their charity. Her parents had lost their house, her brother had failed to repay his debts, and Tyson had disappeared from her life. Her so-called friends, the ones who had once adored her, had vanished. Samantha was left to face the consequences of her own choices. Dexter should have felt pity for her, but he didn't. He had no sympathy for her struggles, because every tear and every hardship she faced was a reflection of the decisions she had made. Dexter's greatest revenge wasn't in humiliating her at that restaurant. It was in living the life she had always believed he would never achieve. He had shown her and the world that the strength she never saw in him was real. Dexter's journey was proof that no one has a right to define us by our failures. Yes, he had fallen, but he had risen stronger than ever. And Samantha? She would remain on the ground, trapped in the life she had chosen for herself, while Dexter moved forward, forging his own path.